Hello there, it's Phumlani Majosi, the author of Lessons from Past Heroes. This is the Phumlani Majosi show, where we give you common sense on local and global economic and political affairs. Today, I'm speaking to a very interesting public intellectual, a very interesting author, the head of policy at the Free Market Foundation, Martin van Staden. He's always, sharing his insights on South Africa's public policy through writings, through commentary on podcasts and TV and radio and so on. So today, he and I are going to delve into the Democratic Alliance and the Government of National Unity, and of course other parties that are involved. But more specifically, I want us to talk about the Democratic Alliance, which is the biggest, second party after the ANC in the Government of National Unity. Martin, it's hard to call. I used to call the DA the biggest opposition party in South Africa. So now I need to watch out for my language. Martin, how are you? Are you good?
Thanks for having me, Pumlani. Yeah, no, it's the way our political language has had to change after May 2024 has been difficult. I've now come around to talking about the former opposition party, so that kind of
Yeah,
helps me with
yeah.
that.
And it's hard to get used to that language, eh? Because I've
Yeah.
struggled. I used to say to people, it's the biggest opposition party in South Africa, but now they're no longer in the opposition. It's quite
Mm,
a
mm.
something not easy to get used to. But Martin, let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear your thoughts. For the DA, I think 3, 4 years back, maybe 2 or 3 years back, I would listen to John Steenhuisen, right, the leader of the DA, and he would say, well, they would be willing to work with the ANC in 2024. This is back then, speaking about the future. They would be willing to work with the ANC, but it would be the ANC of Ramaphosa, right? So not the Zuma types faction of the ANC, but the Ramaphosa faction of the ANC, because he saw that faction of the ANC as more, constitutionalist, a bit pro-market, very much pro-democracy. That was his view at the time. And then 2024 came, they got into this coalition. Do you think was this the right decision by the DA to go into this coalition government with the ANC?
Mm. Well, let me start by saying that we in the Free Market Foundation have various views. So we had an event a few days ago where me and Zakele Mtembu, my colleague, had a big debate on stage about whether the GNU is or isn't a good idea. So just firstly, I don't speak for the FMF here. I speak only for myself. There are various views here. So in November of 2022, that is 3 years ago, I wrote the first column saying the Democratic Alliance specifically, but really any reform-minded opposition party, this is the IFP, Freedom Front, etc., must be very careful about going into a coalition with the ANC. Because as you say, this idea started kind of bubbling up back then. The DA would never openly say we are going into a coalition. They would deny that. They would just say we want to avoid the doomsday coalition. But it was clear if you read between the lines that this was on the agenda. So I started writing about this in November of 2022, and I wrote about it in 2023, and then of course in 2024 again, saying that listen, the ANC, we know the ANC, we understand the ANC. You cannot go into a coalition with this entity without you changing your nature as the DA or these other parties. Now, let me briefly say what I meant by that. The ANC and the EFF and MK and so on are all Machiavellian parties. What does that mean? That means that they are willing to do whatever it takes really to get done what they want done. The DA, the Freedom Front, the IFP are not Machiavellian parties. They step back. They say, we will not step over the line. If you're not willing to step over certain lines of propriety, then you cannot go into a coalition with a party like the ANC because they will eat you for breakfast. They will play you like a fiddle because they're willing to step over the line and you are not willing to step over the line. So I was warning against that. I didn't. The alternative that I advocated and which the FMF later advocated was a confidence and supply arrangement, whereby instead of going into government, the DA or another party should have said to the ANC, "Listen, you can be a minority government, and we will pass your budgets, and we will ensure that your president is not removed from office to keep the EFF and MK out, but we will not go into government with you." Because you're corrupt and your ideology is toxic, and we cannot be associated with that. Now, this idea was rejected by the DA, and they said we're going to go into government because they told us they would have leverage and influence over government policy. Now, I have my doubts, Phumlani. We've now seen the government of national unity. It's coming up on a year. In June of this year, it would be a year of GNU. And there has not been one substantive or fundamental policy reform away from the socialism and the centrally planned model that the ANC advocates. And in fact, some of the worst, call it doomsday policies like NHI, like Bella, and specifically the Expropriation Act have now become practical law in South Africa under this GNU. So to answer your question, no, I don't think this was the right move. I think what we're seeing now was very predictable and predicted. And the DA was warned, the Freedom Front was warned, the IFP was warned that exactly this will happen, and they chose to ignore that. And yet here we are. So no, I'm quite pessimistic about this institution that has now swept up the old opposition. And it's important to have an opposition in a democracy. The old opposition has been swept up and is used to legitimize these bad policies now, because now there is no opposition to them anymore in parliament. And yeah, that's a problem. I think South Africa is a poor democracy for it.
Now, the argument is going to be that, well, the alternative was that the ANC was going to go into a coalition with the MK and the EFF, which makes it even, that's more like radical left wing sort of direction for South Africa, right? Because we
Mm.
do know the policies that are advocated by the EFF, right? Nationalizations, all kinds of, at least, I think there's, say, at least 6,000 rand minimum wage, land, when it comes to land issues, they are very much in support of this government taking full control of such things. When you look at their manifesto, that of the EFF and that of the MK party, I've always asked myself, Martin, why they don't just combine? Because it's all socialist, very much communist, statist, ideology. Now,
Mm.
people they say, well, look, the alternative was that route, or that route, as Americans would say, it was that route. The alternative, rather, it's better. And I even still see this argument online. People are saying, well, if the DA leaves, then look, we're going to slip into Venezuela, right? Or North Korea, whatever you want to call this statist way of governance. What do you say to people like that who say the alternative was much more worse? Rather,
Yeah.
in fact, even some of the many people in the DA were saying that,
Mm.
well, we are staying because if we get off here, or we are not part of this, South Africa slips into radical
Mm.
Marxism.
Yes. So, firstly, that's a valid concern. It's absolutely a valid concern, and everyone who says that is absolutely right. The EFF and MK have it's a death cult. They're death cults. They will kill everyone that cannot leave and flee the country. So, these are communist totalitarian entities that must be kept out of government, really, by any means necessary. Ultimately, but my question has been, what is the GNU, being the ANC, DA, etc., not willing to do that the EFF and MK wants? So currently, we just got the Expropriation Act. Expropriation without compensation. We have it. We have nationalized healthcare. They haven't done it yet, but the law is now on the books. It's there. A big step has been taken to destroy the remaining autonomy of certain public schools with the Bella Act. The 100 billion rand transformation fund, which would raise taxes to do more racial rent seeking. All these EFF and MK type policies are coming anyway. Now, that is not me delegitimizing the criticism that it would be worse under the EFF or MK in government. I'm sure it would. But we have to ask ourselves, are we actually, is that an alternative that is being avoided? Or do we have that anyway, just at maybe a slightly slower pace? That's what I would say people really need to think about. Is there any real red line where the GNU would say, well, we formed this thing to avoid this specifically, so we're not going to do it? I don't think so. I don't think there's any red line, because if ever there was a red line, the Expropriation Act would be it. It's very difficult to think of something worse than the Expropriation Act. You can think of worse things, but let's keep it on the reservation of a modern democracy. It's very difficult to think of anything worse than the Expropriation Act. Now, that's one thing. Is EFF MK really an alternative, or did we just get that anyway in another form? That's the first thing. The second point is, um, are we sure that the ANC would have just formed a coalition with the EFF or MK? Not the Ramaphosa faction. They hate Ramaphosa. So the one of the criticisms that I have of the GNU, and specifically the DA and these other parties, is that they knew that Ramaphosa despises the EFF and MK more than Ramaphosa despises them as the DA and the Freedom Front. And they should have used that as leverage. They should have said, listen, Mr. President, your choice is to work with us, or your choice is to work with them. And if they get into government, you know what happens. You're going to be removed from power and you're going to be replaced by someone else. They hate you. So they should have weaponized that concern of the Ramaphosa faction. These are all socialists. They're all corrupt. I understand it. But on a factional basis, the Ramaphosa faction and the Malema faction and the Zuma faction, they're competing with each other. And the DA and the Freedom Front and the IFP have done none of that. They did not go to Ramaphosa and say, listen, we will walk and force you into a coalition of Jacob Zuma, and then let's see what happens. You will be out on the street, Mr. President. That is what they should have done. That goes back to the Machiavellian approach that I spoke about earlier. They should have utilized their leverage to say, we will walk, and then you have to deal with these people. So I don't think the ANC just would have gone into a coalition with the EFF and MK. I think it's a valid concern. Again, it is absolutely a valid concern. But I don't think it would have just happened as a matter of course, as many people make it out to be. I think there were various struggle points and frictional points that would have had to be solved first, like the ANC getting rid of Cyril Ramaphosa. I think that might have had to be a first step before that happens. And that's tough because people don't like the ANC, but they like Cyril Ramaphosa, and he's one of their big assets. So there are various political factors here that I don't think the former opposition parties paid enough attention to. And to top that off, when the election was over, the ANC offered the DA confidence and supply. It was the ANC's idea. They said, we do not want to go into a coalition with anyone, including the EFF, including MK and the DA. We just want to be a minority government. Can you, as the DA, please give us confidence and supply? So the ANC already said they do not want to go into a coalition with the Doomsday Cult. So why was that opportunity not grabbed? Why did the DA not say, great, awesome, then we will keep you as a minority government and we will continue to be a good, effective opposition in parliament until the next election? That is what I was advocating, and that is what I think would have been better. Now, of course, a lot of people would say, but that nothing then stops the ANC from, if it adopts, it wants a certain EFF policy, then the EFF will vote for it. Again, that happens now. That can happen right now in the midst of the GNU. But what was important to me when I was advocating this confidence and supply thing was to retain a strong opposition. You cannot have a functional democracy without a strong opposition.
Yeah,
And
that's
we do
true.
have we had a strong opposition, which was in government in the Western Cape, in various municipalities. It's a strong opposition. We needed that. We lost that, and I hope that we can regain that before the next election.
Mm, mm. You know, um, Martin, I when Ramaphosa appointed his bloated government, I'm a person who's very much anti big government spending, right? Because I think that's just bad for economies and for societies. When he appointed his very much bloated cabinet, because of these 10 parties, they've put together, calling the whole thing the government of national unity. I was like, this was not necessary in the first place, right? Because the ANC should have chosen either they go with the MKEFF or they go the DA. This thing was some sort of trickery by the ANC, that they call this thing a government of national unity. I think it was disrespect to us as citizens because it bloats at the entire, the cabinet, which means that it's expensive for us taxpayers to pay for such. And I sense from you that you think that the DA was weak in post the outcome of the May 29 election, and that they were not strong enough to push the boundaries in terms of negotiations. Is that what we are saying here? That they could have done better. They could have pressured the ANC and go into a direction of confidence and supply, as you say. But overall, we are saying they were weaker in negotiating in this government of national unity when it was formed, or this coalition government.
Yes, so I think that's correct. I think they should have pushed for more. I don't think they could have, and this is what I pointed out in my column because I think the party for decades has set itself up in this very problematic way whereby everything has to be decent. And if you see a lot of DA representatives on social media talk about collegiality that they have to have with their new ANC colleagues. One very senior DA member of the new government spoke about friendship with his new ANC colleagues. Now, this is a mentality that's very much culturally bred. It's something that the institutional culture of the Democratic Alliance and certainly other parties breeds. It's this idea of we have to be on a high horse, we have to be the white knights, we have to be these. The way I always describe it, and it maybe the image resonates with people, is that the Democratic Alliance fundamentally thinks that South Africa is a small Scandinavian welfare state. We're not in Africa, we're in Europe. Everything is nice. Everyone respects each other. It's business as usual. And that is not the reality, but that is the culture that the DA breeds. So I don't think that the DA could have negotiated for more because that would have required it to have a certain level of understanding of the cultural, social context that it finds itself in. But yes, it should have done that. It should have went into these negotiations if it wanted a coalition. It should have gone into it with preconditions. It should have said, listen, Ramaphosa, you take the expropriation bill off the table. We never want to hear about it again. It's off the table. That's the condition for us coming into this coalition. They didn't do any of that. There was not one precondition, not a singular one. And that, I mean, that is a problem. They went into this half-cocked. They thought that their mere presence would be leverage enough to dissuade the ANC from going down a bad policy route. And I just get the sense that they didn't really plan for what happened, despite the fact, again, that they were warned. That the warning signs were there. People were pleading with them, saying, you're going to make a mistake if you do this because you do not understand the beast that you want to get into bed with. And I think that they were overcome by delusions of grandeur. I think that the DA has governed very well in many places of South Africa. And in this Scandinavian welfare state mentality that I think they have, they thought, well, voters are seeing this. And if we're in government, the voters will see us as the party of good government and we'll be rewarded for that. And that's just not South Africa. That is just not our politics. Our politics is one of power, of using power and leverage and forcing ultimately people to accommodate what you want as a reformist government. And we did not see that, Phumlani. That's the weakness that you're referring to, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. This is the Phumlani Majosi show. I'm speaking to Martin van Staden. He is the head of policy at the Free Market Foundation and author as well. He writes a lot and he is on X at I'm trying to look for your at Martin underscore ASFL. Yeah, that's his Twitter X handle. So we are discussing the Democratic Alliance in this government of national unity or the coalition government. Remember to get yourself a copy of my book at a bookstore near you. You can also order on Amazon.co.za. .za as well. Get your copy and try to make sense of the ideas we stand for. Martin, now the thing is, to me, and I want you to maybe correct my thinking here, right? I just feel like um, remember how the ANC sort of started this whole thing of a government of national unity, right? They
Mhm.
negotiated internally with their NEC, whatever, for a few days. Everybody was waiting as to the expectation by many, even by by fund managers, was that well, the ANC is gonna go either for the EFF or MK or that or the DA, right? And then they came out and surprised many people actually by saying we should go for a government of national unity, right?
Mhm.
Now the thing is, here's this, Martin. The thing is, the NC said it invites everybody and every party, right, to join the government of national unity, meaning that even MK, even EFF, right. Now, that means the NC was willing to work with the EFF and MK party. But then it was the MK party and the EFF who said, we are not going to join this coalition government or this government of national unity if there is DA. Because the DA is a racist party, it supported apartheid, you could go on, right? So my point is that the NC, in a way, in fact, it didn't show any, you know, it wanted to work with the MK party and the EFF. It's just that those two parties decided not to come in because they do not want to work with the DA. In other words, if the DA leaves, these parties will jump in, and the NC won't say no, right? Are they going to say no?
I think so. I think that the ANC is a very politically astute organization. They are bad at government. They believe in the most evil ideologies in human history, but you cannot say that they do not know how to play the political game. The ANC plays good politics, and I think that the GNU was a masterstroke by the ANC to invite the EFF and MK knowing that EFF and MK would say no. I think that the ANC understood, or at least the Ramaphosa faction understood, that the DA will say yes. I think they knew the DA will absolutely say yes. It's guaranteed. Various other parties would say yes. And then as a result of that, they knew the EFF and MK would say no. I think that their advisors advised them as such. And I think the nature of the relationship between Ramaphosa and Julius Malema and certainly Jacob Zuma just made that relationship absolutely unworkable. Now, even if the EFF played its own Machiavellian game and joined the government of national unity, I think that that wouldn't have lasted. I think that the EFF probably would have left that without having been able to achieve anything because of how diluted their voice would have been in that government, which is another ANC masterstroke. By inviting everyone and not just the DA, for instance, it diluted the DA's influence in the government of national unity anyway. So this whole thing, and it's the second time that the ANC has played the GNU game. In the 1990s, it did it for the first time. So it has some experience in this. I think it knew. I think it knew very well that the EFF and MK would not take the bait, and I think they were correct in that. And still today, I would say that if the GNU crumbles, and the people fear that the EFF and MK would join with the ANC, I think that's it. It's possible, but I think it's implausible, at least for a while Cyril Ramaphosa is there. I
So
think that once
you are
he's
saying,
gone in 2027,
mm,
then things change significantly. And they might get rid of Cyril Ramaphosa. Well, they have to get rid of Cyril Ramaphosa in 2027. That is really when that calculation changes. And that's why I think because we have this window before 2027 and between the election and the formation of the government of national unity, an opportunity to work to play the Ramaphosa faction in a direction of reform. If you know Michael Malice, he's a popular libertarian commentator. He recently published a book about the Soviet Union, and he really explained how Lenin fought when Lenin became the leader of the Soviet Union, and it was basically this: we are the first socialist state, and we now have a great opportunity to implement our policies. That means, what does that mean? We are not going to hold back. We are going full bore. We're going to take the opportunity and milk it for all that it's worth. What does that mean for the GNU? We were told that this is a once in a generation opportunity for reformists like the DA, etc., to be in government and to really push for change. But did they throw over caution to the wind and say, okay, we're here now, we're gonna push the advantage, we're gonna put pedal to the metal? That is what they should have done, because there is this window that closes in 2027. The GNU, one way or the other, I think comes to an end in 2027. And that's the issue. We have Ramaphosa as the president. He is a weak man, he is a weak president, and he is in a precarious position, and that should have been exploited. And that changes in 2027.
Yeah. So yeah, the DA has been quite has been weak, no doubt. They are not pushing forcefully to fight for what they stand for. Now, just a quick question. So, and I want you to give me a very sort of brief explanation here. With the bills, right? The bills that were already um, sort of approved in Parliament before May 29, right? This was when the ANC was still the majority.
Hmm.
And they had not been signed by the president into law. And the president is now signing them into law. Can the DA be able to fight over that? For some people say, well, look, well, it's maybe don't really blame the DA. Don't be hard on them because these bills were passed before May 29. So in other words, they were already laws. All the president had to do was to sign them to close off the loop. How to respond to that?
Well, it's simple. So this is a formalistic trick. So the ANC has passed many laws in South African history, and then it takes years upon years upon years before the president signs that law into operation. That this has happened repeatedly. It happens around the world as well. So that was the status quo. Suddenly now, no, there is this ethereal kind of abstract obligation that the president must sign the bill immediately, despite any opposition. That is absolute nonsense, and we shouldn't fall for it. The fact is, yes, Parliament did pass those bills. They were waiting for the president. The presidential signature is a matter of policy. It is a matter of politics, not of law. There's legal aspects, of course, but ultimately it's up to whatever kind of agreement there was, whatever the convention of our political system is, when it's signed. And this is, again, it goes back to what was negotiated when the GNU was formed. They should have said, yes, these bills have been passed, Mr. President, but your pen comes nowhere close to them for the duration of this government. Or
Yeah.
we were told about this sufficient consensus. There's this requirement that all policy matters are resolved by sufficient consensus. If there's a disagreement, you need sufficient consensus, which means the ANC and the DA at least must agree. That did not happen. That did not happen. The president just took his pen and he signed it. That is, of course, something that you can blame the other partners to the GNU for, because they should have exercised the leverage that they held. They should have went to Ramaphosa and said, listen, if you sign it, it's over. You would have broken the agreement that we signed, that we agreed to. You're breaking contract. Pactum sunt servanda. You are a liar, Mr. President. They should have exerted that kind of pressure, but they didn't, and they don't. We hear at press conferences about people sending letters to the president and dear Mr. President and blah, and they get ignored and so on, and it's like a tear fest. That is unacceptable. That is what small Scandinavian welfare state mentalities that we see trying to be applied in Africa. It doesn't work. Be powerful, bring the leverage that you have to bear on these people and threaten them and set ultimatums. Don't say there is no ultimatum. You must set ultimatums and then you must follow through. If you set a red line, you must follow through. Unfortunately, we don't see any of that, but we must reject these appeals to pure formalism by
Yeah.
people trying to excuse this behavior.
Yeah, yeah. The DA must get brutal. If they're trying to play nice, they're going to lose votes. But I'm seeing a lot of frustration as well from the people, at least on social media, the people who have voted for the DA before. Martin, who are saying, "Look, you are selling us out." How does Bella go through? How does expropriation goes through in terms of being signed by the president?
Mm.
And there's NHI coming. It's very likely, at least some people argue, that it again here the DA will be weak, and then the president signs it into law. Just a quick one. I just want to look at the comments here because I posted something here um, on um, on X earlier this morning, promoting this chat. There is a person. Okay, so Maki Gandu. I hope I pronounced her surname right, and her name, Maki Gandu. She said, "What and about a vote of no confidence in the president? Feasible or not? Ballsy or stupid?" And then the other person, I think there's Human. He said expropriation is a killer for the economy. No more investment or business growth, more unemployment, and more uncertainty as well. And then there's ordinary SA guy who said his opinion when I was asking, should the DA exit? He said yes, but JS, I believe this is John Steenhuisen, is not the leader to lead the DA. ANC will never change. They don't have the modern thinking required to lead a country in the 21st century. And then there's George, who said the DA, FF Plus, and rest of GNU overstayed their welcome. Time to move on. Let ANC, MKEFF do it on their own and distract themselves. So those are the comments that came through. But the one
Mm.
from Maggie Martin, quickly, because we have 2 or 3
Yes.
minutes left. The vote of no confidence in the president. In other words, if the DA were to go full blown in destabilizing, go fully in to try and destabilize this government and say we are putting forward a vote of no confidence, would that reshape our politics or the dynamics?
It it could be risky, and but I think it's probably worth it. So if you put a vote
To
of no
show
confidence in
Ramaphosa
the
that
president,
listen, we are serious here.
yeah,
You know.
exactly. Yeah. So it's a risky move. Of course, it's a risky move, and it could turn out bad, and it could turn out well. But I think that ultimately you have to play that card because otherwise you just sap yourself of credibility. So what would happen is that the EFF and MK would probably vote in favor of it, and that means that Ramaphosa and his cabinet are removed as president and cabinet. So that would be a significant event. And then you can't just, I think, then just reappoint Ramaphosa. So it's a big threat. It's a very big threat. And I think it should be made because, as I said, Phumlani, we're getting EFF and MK policies now anyway. And to top it off, the DA is now implementing that. So I'm just wondering what the end game is here. And something's got to give. I think that it would have been better and safer to have preconditions beforehand. That would have been much less risky than where we are now. But now we are here now. And you cannot keep threatening and not following through. So I would say a vote of no confidence wouldn't be outside of what I think is reasonable, but also if there's other Machiavellian ways to exert leverage and power, do those things. Do those things. But I don't see any of it happening, Pumlani. I don't have confidence.
Mm, mm, mm. Martin, thank you so much, sir. Wonderful to talk to you. I really appreciate your insights. Hopefully next we'll get some time to chat again. Remember, Martin
Mm.
is on X at Martin underscore ASFL. You can find him there. You can check his work online. What other platforms can they find you on, Martin?
I think the
Facebook.
best place is to go to my website. That's martinvanstaden.com. And of course, have a look at the Free Market Foundation's website and social media as well. That's freemarketfoundation.com. Thanks for having me, Pumlani. It's been great.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. To you all, remember, I am on X at Phumlani M. Majosi. I do have a website, phumlanimajosi.com. I'm also on Facebook. Check my Facebook page, Phumlani M. Majosi. We'll chat soon.